They fired the nurse for touching a VIP patient. Then the Pentagon called the hospital. She was the nurse nobody noticed. Quiet. Punctual. Always the first one to clock in, always the last one to leave. To the staff at Ashford Memorial, she was just Maren Colt. Room assignments. 4 bags. A steady hand and a soft voice. Nobody knew what she used to be. Nobody knew that 6 years ago, her hands had done things far more dangerous than changing a dressing. Then, on a Tuesday morning in March, a stranger was wheeled through the emergency doors, bleeding, unconscious, and muttering a name that hadn't been spoken aloud in 6 years. Her name. The old one. And everything was about to come apart. Before we go further, welcome to Silent Heroes, the channel where the quiet ones turn out to be the strongest ones. If you're watching this from somewhere far from home tonight, drop your city in the comments. And if you like stories about people who carry more than anyone realizes, hit subscribe, because this one's just getting started. Ashford Memorial sat on the edge of a mid-sized city, the kind of hospital that saw car wrecks and heart attacks and never anything stranger than that. Fluorescent lights hummed over linoleum floors that squeaked under rubber-soled shoes. It smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee, the same as every hospital in every town in the country. Maren fit right into it. She wore her dark hair pulled back tight, no makeup, scrubs a size too big so nothing about her shape stood out. A thin white scar ran along her left forearm, and when anyone asked, she said, "Kitchen accident," and changed the subject. Her hands were steady, but she kept them folded low, out of sight, out of memory. She had learned the fastest way to survive was to make herself small. Small enough that no one asked where a small-town nurse learned to pack a gunshot wound like she'd done it 100 times. Small enough that no one asked why her eyes swept a room for exits before she swept it for supplies. Dr. Preston Halloway ran the ER like it belonged to him. Tall, silver-templed, always in a coat pressed sharp enough to cut. He liked being watched. He liked being obeyed more. "Colt, chart now. And try not to slow me down today." That was his favorite line, delivered loud enough for the nurse's station to hear, soft enough to sound like a joke if anyone complained. He built his reputation on other people's work and buried his mistakes under confidence. Ambition wore a white coat well, and Halloway wore it like a costume. Only one person ever saw past hers. Old Mr. Averitt, in for his 3rd round of dialysis that month, caught her hand once when she adjusted his 4-line. "You've seen war," he said, quiet like he was stating the weather. "I can tell." My son had that same look. She didn't answer. She just tucked the blanket tighter around his knees and moved to the next bed. He'd remember saying it. So would she. By 9:14 that morning, the doors of the ER burst open with a violence that scattered charts off the front desk. Sirens outside. Shouting inside. Male, 40s, gunshot wound to the chest, BP dropping, "We need a trauma bay now." Halloway strode in like a man walking onto a stage, calling orders that sounded confident and were almost entirely wrong. "Start a line, get me imaging, we're looking at a hemothorax." Maren was already at the bedside. She saw what he didn't. The trachea shifted subtly to one side. Jugular veins bulging despite the blood loss. Breath sounds gone on the left. Oxygen dropping fast even with the mask cranked high. Not a hemothorax. A tension pneumothorax. Air trapped in the chest cavity with nowhere to escape, crushing the lung, collapsing the great vessels, minutes from stopping the heart entirely. She'd seen it before. She'd treated it before, in far worse conditions than this. Then the patient's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, and his lips moved around one word. Ghost. The word hit the room like a detonation. Every nurse froze. Halloway's head snapped toward her. "What did he just say?" he demanded. "Colt, do you know this man?" Maren said nothing. Her jaw tightened. Her hands, for the first time in 6 years, stopped shaking. "I asked you a question," Halloway snapped, stepping closer, his voice climbing toward the tone he used when he wanted witnesses to see him in charge. "Explain yourself." She didn't explain. She reached for the 14-gauge needle on the crash cart instead. "Step back," she said. Flat. Certain. A voice that had given orders before, in places far louder than this. For attention pneumothorax, seconds matter. Untreated, the pressure inside the chest keeps building until it stops blood from returning to the heart altogether. Full cardiac arrest, and no amount of CPR fixes what a needle could have solved 30 seconds earlier. The fix is brutal and simple. A needle inserted into the second intercostal space, releasing the trapped air, buying time until a chest tube can finish the job. Her spine straightened. Her gaze locked, unblinking. The tremor that had lived in her hands for 6 years was gone, vanished the instant it mattered. She found the landmark, angled the needle, and pushed it home. A hiss of escaping air. The monitor's alarm dropped its pitch as oxygen climbed. The patient's chest rose on its own for the first time in 90 seconds. Somewhere behind her, a nurse whispered, "How did she?" Holloway stood frozen, exposed, wrong in front of everyone. And Marin Colt, for the first time in 6 years, didn't look away. Holloway recovered fast. Too fast. He straightened his coat, cleared his throat, and turned to the room like the last 90 seconds hadn't happened. Unauthorized procedure. No physician order. That's a termination offense, and everyone here just witnessed it. The trauma bay went silent. "She saved his life," a junior nurse said quietly. "She violated protocol," Holloway shot back. "Colt, badge and scrubs, now. Security will escort you out." Marin peeled off her gloves without a word. Her hands, still steady, dropped the gloves into the bin like she was setting down something she'd carried too long. "No," she said. "I am just done hiding." She didn't leave. She stayed at the patient's bedside, monitoring his vitals, adjusting his oxygen, ignoring the security guard hovering uselessly by the door. A small crowd had gathered at the edges of the bay. Nurses, techs, even Mr. Averitt, wheeled out from dialysis to see what the commotion was. Nobody moved to stop her. Nobody wanted to. "She's not wrong to stay," Mr. Averitt said, loud enough for Holloway to hear. "I told you. War does that to a person's hands." Holloway's face reddened. "This isn't the time for—" By 9:41 that morning, the ER doors opened again. This time it wasn't a gurney. It was 2 men in dress uniforms, moving with the kind of purpose that made the whole room straighten up without being told to. "We're looking for the nurse who treated Colonel Reyes," the older one said. Silver eagles on his collar. A face like carved stone. "That would be me," Holloway said, stepping forward, chest out. "No, sir. It wouldn't." The officer's eyes moved past him, landing on Marin. "Captain Elena Voss. Combat medic, 3rd Special Forces Group. 2 bronze stars. A silver star you were never allowed to talk about, because half of what you did over there is still classified." The room went dead quiet. "Voss," Holloway repeated, stunned. "Her name is Colt." "Her name," the officer said, "was never yours to question." He read the rest of it out loud, right there in the trauma bay. The deployments, the field hospital she'd kept running under fire for 6 hours with no backup, the men she'd carried out on her own back when the extraction chopper couldn't land. Every word landed like a verdict. Holloway's authority evaporated in real time. I had no way of knowing." "You had a woman under your supervision for 2 years, the officer said, "and your only contribution was humiliating her in front of patients. Effective immediately, Dr. Holloway, the board has been notified of this incident and several others we've been made aware of." Holloway's mouth opened, searching for a line that would save him. What came out instead was smaller than he meant it to be. "I built this department. I don't answer to soldiers." "You don't answer to us," the officer said. "You answer to them." He nodded toward the gathered staff. They just watched everything. What came next wasn't classified at all. An anonymous tip reached hospital administration by that afternoon. Falsified incident reports, written by Holloway himself, blaming 3 past patient complications on nurses who'd simply followed his bad orders. One of them had lost her license over it. Another had quietly resigned. Records showed a pattern, a payment trail leading back to a drug trial Holloway had pushed through years ago, cutting corners for a funding bonus tied to enrollment numbers. Patients had been hurt. He'd covered it, every time, by making someone smaller than him take the fall. He wasn't finished covering yet. That evening, as Marin gathered her things from her locker, Holloway cornered her in the empty stairwell, his composure gone, his voice low and desperate. "You ruin me, I ruin you. I still have friends on that board." "You don't have anything anymore," she said. He lunged for the folder in her hands, the printed records she'd pulled the moment she suspected, and the shove that followed sent her back against the railing, hard. Old instincts don't vanish. They wait. She turned his own momentum against him, pinned his arm before he understood what happened, and held him there, calm, controlled, the way she'd once held far more dangerous men still. "Colonel Reyes wrote a letter for a friend of mine once," she said quietly. "He never made it home to read the reply. I have spent 6 years trying to be someone who wouldn't have to do this again. You don't get to make me." Security arrived seconds later. He didn't resist. "He has a chance," she told the ER doctor an hour later, checking on Colonel Reyes one last time before her shift technically, officially, ended. "That's enough for tonight." 3 weeks later, Ashford Memorial opened its new Combat Trauma and Veterans Care Unit, named in honor of the medic who'd built it from a single act of defiance in a stairwell. Marin stood at its entrance in a new coat, her name stitched clean across the pocket. Both names, old and new, finally worn together instead of hidden apart. Mr. Averitt was there, in a wheelchair near the front, grinning like he'd known all along. "Told you," he said. She smiled. "You did." Holloway lost his license within the month. The board named the new policy after one of the nurses he'd wronged, a rule requiring every incident report to carry 2 signatures, never one man's word alone. Strength isn't loud. It doesn't need an audience or a title to prove itself. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the only one who knows exactly what to do when everything falls apart, and the bravest thing she ever does is stop pretending she doesn't. If this story moved you, hit like, subscribe to Silent Heroes for more, and tell us in the comments, what would you have done in that stairwell? The next story is already waiting. The end.